My name is Shay, and this is my story and my journey to free Spirit Equestrian.
Hey horse lovers, welcome back to Free Spirit Equestrian. My equestrian story has been a highly requested video for a long time now, and I am so excited to be able to take you through my entire life journey as an equestrian. I truly believe as a horse girl that you are born with that gene and that it just flows through your veins, like the love and passion for horses. But this was all ignited for me when I was 3 years old and I went to the local county fair and I went on a pony ride. It was just the most incredible experience for me as a child, and it completely lit up my entire world. I definitely did not want to get off the pony. I was crying, and ever since that day, I was completely obsessed with horses. Every single birthday, Christmas, wish, I wanted a horse so bad. I just had that complete obsession with them. I would read all kinds of books. I would study everything I knew about the breeds and how to care for them. It would actually get to a point where my parents around dinner time would be like, okay, Shay, at this point you have to stop talking about horses, because I just was nonstop about them. And essentially how it all started in regards to actually interacting with horses is when I was 7 years old, I started taking lessons. This was an absolute dream come true for me at the time. I just could not wait for my lesson every single week. I wouldn't even wash my hands when I got home from the barn because I wanted to smell like horses. This is how deep this was. So I took lessons at a couple barns in the area, and I originally grew up in Illinois. So my dad was a corn farmer, and so was my grandpa. We did corn and beans, so crops only. I've always been a farm girl at heart. So country life has definitely stuck with me throughout my entire journey. I took lessons at a few of these barns in Illinois. I would ride Western and English, and we did little shows and would do some trail rides as well. My favorite lesson horses would have to be Porsche. He was just this gorgeous horse, and looking back, I kind of wish that I just had him now because I love his size and he's just absolutely beautiful, and he took really good care of me during lessons. And then I had Deluxe, who was another one of my favorite lesson horses. I did mainly Western on him and did a few shows at the barn, and he was just very quiet and sweet. My all-time favorite lesson horse was Bart. So he was just this like short, stocky sorrel gelding, and he just had the most gentle nature and always took care of me. I mainly did Western on him, and I loved to do like egg and spoon during the shows with him, and we would do down and back with like one barrel. And my favorite memory of all time as a kid on horseback was winning the down and back event with Bart. He was just such an amazing horse. So Bart always had a special place in my heart, even though, again, he was just a school horse to me, and of course I could only go and ride him once a week. But in my heart, I just knew that I just loved him so much. And then I also did English lessons on a horse named Simon at a English only sort of hunter jumper barn. He was beautiful. He was also a sorrel chestnut gelding. He was just a very patient horse as well. While I was taking lessons at these barns, I essentially learned all of my basics when it came to riding horses and horsemanship. They would have you groom and tack up as well, so I did learn how to do that. And of course, I learned walk, trot, canter. We did a little bit of jumping, and like I said, we would do just some fun games and some trail rides here and there. And I would do the summer camps, which I looked forward to every single year, is going to riding camp. I mean, that was just the highlight of my entire world. I basically did that from 7 all the way up until I would say I was like 14. And in between those times, I also would go around with my Aunt Gail, and she would take me to places where she cleaned houses, and oftentimes they had horses or other animals. So I loved going to help my Aunt Gail clean. And then if I was lucky, the owners of the farm with the horses would let me interact with them. So there was one horse in particular that I remember. Her name was Dawn, and she was a quarter horse Arabian cross, another sorrel. I'm just laughing because those of you who know me, like, I say that I'm a color snob, but at the end of the day, I love all horses, and a lot of my most memorable horses growing up were sorrels or bays. So it's just really funny. But I would ride Dawn around the field. I would jump her over some cross rails and logs and stuff like that. I remember she was the first horse I ever did a full gallop on, and I think I was like 10 or 11 at the time. So yeah, that was incredible. And then I got to ride and lease a phenomenal horse named Satin. So she was a saddlebred, and this was at a saddlebred barn in Illinois. And she was on the younger side. I think she was like 6 or 7. And we really did consider buying her at the time, but there was a lot going on with my family, so it just didn't make sense. But I was able to ride and spend time with her, and that was just fantastic. Got to do some obstacles with her and some groundwork, so I learned a lot with her in regards to riding different breeds. So that was very fun, and I will always remember Satin as well. I also had the opportunity to go with my grandma down to Southern Illinois in Mount Vernon, and he had horses. One time they did something very special for me. This just made my entire life at the time, you know, these milestones. At this farm, they had a few horses. One of them was Lucky. He was a sorrel, and I think he was only like 2 or 3 at the time, so he wasn't broke to ride. And then they had another sorrel mare, and I was able to ride her a little bit too. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. But one day when I was visiting down there for the summer, all of a sudden they show up with this trailer and these horses come out. And I was like, what is this? They're like, these are our friends and they're gonna take you trail riding around here. I absolutely lost it. I was so excited. How kind and special is that? It just truly meant the world to me even as a kid. Like, I still appreciated it as much as I did as a kid as I do now. So we went and rode all day, and that was just phenomenal. So obviously I begged and pleaded to get a horse my entire life, but it just really wasn't in the cards as a child, and that's okay, because now as an adult, I can truly appreciate everything that I have worked for and everything I have. It did not just come automatic. I did not grow up as somebody who was in an equestrian world to begin with. For example, nobody in my family likes horses. I mean, of course they like them, but nobody is into horses. Nobody's an equestrian. My farm was only crops. We didn't have animals, you know what I mean? So basically, I was like the only horse girl. So my grandpa, I spent a lot of time at his farm, and I begged him for a horse, but he thought it was just a phase at the time. He has since passed, but little does he know, it is definitely not a phase. I didn't come from tons of money. We were just, you know, an average middle-class family. So everything that I have throughout this journey, I somehow managed to do myself, and it just gets better from here. So I begged and pleaded and just wanted a horse so bad. And I sort of went through a phase when I was between, I would say like 15 and 16. I really just didn't think it was gonna happen. And I was always told that you shouldn't make your career horses because there's no money in horses, and don't make your hobby or your passion your work, because then you might get burnt out and not love it as much. And yes, I do believe that there is some truth in that, but now I know that that's not necessarily true. So basically from like 15 to 16, I would ride like on and off with friends, but nothing serious. And then when I was 16, almost going on to 17, so getting ready to graduate high school, because I graduated when I was 17, I said, that's it. I'm getting a horse. Like, I don't care what it takes. I'm getting a horse. I first was at a hunter jumper barn. I was taking lessons for a little bit, and that's pretty much where I really learned to jump. Like I said, I jumped a little bit as a kid, but you know, I did a little bit more serious jumping when I was about 16. And then there was this beautiful horse that came into the hunter jumper barn, and she was the only Western horse and a quarter horse. She was a gorgeous buckskin named Sophie. I took advantage of the opportunity, and I was able to lease her for 3 months. She was just absolutely lovely and gorgeous and precious, and I really enjoyed spending time with her. But during that time, like towards the end of that 3 months, I then started looking for a horse. So there's a local guy in the area who sells horses, and mainly Appaloosas. So at the time, I was not really like breed biased, nor am I now, but you know what I mean. Now that I've ridden a lot of horses, I've owned a lot of different breeds, I kind of know more like what I like. So he had Appaloosas, and I went and rode a few. I rode a pony, and he was just, I don't know, he was a large pony, but he just was not exactly what I was looking for. I didn't even know what I was looking for at the time, because I was like a teenager, and I was just like, I just want a horse. I want them to be fun, and I want them to be pretty, right? I mean, I knew a little more than that, but you get the point, like teenage brain. Young, barely adult. So then, I rode this horse, and then I rode another, and it kind of had like a weaving thing going on. I was like, yeah, I don't think that, my gut was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And then all of a sudden, I saw the most gorgeous horse out in the pasture. And I looked and I said, what about that one? And he looked and he goes, well, that horse isn't really working out for necessarily what we do, but I wasn't advertising him, but yeah, if you want to try him, you can. Oh my goodness. I go up to him and I was just like, this is the most beautiful horse I've ever seen in my life. A gorgeous leopard spot. So we saddled him up, got him all ready to go. I got on and I rode him around. I did the barrel pattern with him because at the time I was like, I want a barrel race. This is what I want to do. And, trail ride. So I got on him, walk, trot, canter, stopped, staring, and then did the pattern. And he had been started on the pattern a little bit, but didn't know, it wasn't like necessarily second nature, but he definitely had done it. And as we were going around that ring, I kind of was in the back corner and I pet the horse and I kind of whispered to him, I'm going to take the best care of you and we're going to have so much fun. AKA, I'm buying this horse. I don't care what it takes. And his name was Jiminy Cricket. So we did end up purchasing him, and it was really sweet because I was trying to figure out how to get the money together. And last minute, my grandma, my Nini, said, I'm gonna buy him for you, and once you graduate college, you can pay me back. Okay, perfect, sounds good. So they delivered him a couple days later, and my heart just soared. So Jiminy Cricket was my first horse. My goodness, it's been such a journey. I still have him today. So you'll hear more about that. So I did a ton of trail riding with Jiminy. At this point, I had just turned 17. We would ride all over the fields. I spent every single day with him. He was only 5 minutes from my house, my family farm. And I would go there every single day and ride him all around, town. We lived in this very small town. It's Platteville, Illinois. And yeah, and they had an arena, so I would do the barrel pattern and practice doing that. We went to a few shows, we did some 4-H events, and I just had a blast. And we even won the down and back at the 4-H event. So he was just super cool, and honestly, I just got really lucky with him that he took care of me because, I was kind of a dumb teenager. Like the day I got him, I just went out and trail rode in the fields, and he was so good. What? I would never do that now. I would definitely get to know the horse better. But you live and learn. Then we were there for, about 2 years because I was in community college. I did community college just for a couple years and then before I went to university. But at the tail end of that 2 years of owning him, I decided I really liked English, and I wanted to teach him how to jump. So you can see, again, not the smartest choices. Please learn from my mistakes. But I taught him how to jump, and actually, he's really good. So we focused on that and had a lot of fun. And then I got into my university. I went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. So I brought Jiminy with me. So we loaded up and went to college, and I boarded him at a farm that was near my dorm at the time. So I did stay in the dorms just my junior year because I didn't know anybody because I went to community college. So I just did that for a year, and I would again go and see him at least 5 days a week. And they had some barrel racing at this barn too, so I would do that. And they had amazing trails, so I would go out and hit the trails as well. They had some big fields, we would gallop around. This was also near Shawnee, so I would ride through Shawnee. And then I also would fox hunt in Southern Illinois. So my friend or her friend would trailer us, Jiminy, and we would go hunt there. I would also hunt on some of their guest horses, Shadow, and then they had this beautiful horse named Morgan. And I loved it because it was fun, it was fast, it was exhilarating, and it was super cool that I got to do that on Jiminy as well. So it was my junior year of college that I then decided I want to get horses and work with them, and then eventually either keep them or find them a home. So this is where my whole mission concept started, a little tiny seed. The first horse that I purchased other than Jiminy, so my second horse, was Night Fury. At this point, I was 20 years old, and Craigslist was more of a popular way to look for horses for sale. And we found one that was about 30 minutes away. So actually my mom was visiting me at the time, so we drove and looked at him. This horse was a Morgan Quarter Horse cross. I think he was 6 years old at the time, 6 or 7. I took him out on a trail ride, so they took us trail riding, and I could tell, I was like, okay, he doesn't seem like he knows a ton. He's like walking, steering, stopping. So I was like, sounds good. So I purchased him, and then I took him to my boarding barn where Jiminy was as well. And at this point, I had moved Jiminy to another barn because I was living in an apartment now with some friends. I started working with him once he settled in. They had an arena, they had trails, all of that. And he definitely didn't know anything about the arena, so no clue. So I spent a ton of time working with him in the ring, and honestly, I learned a lot of what I know from my basic lessons and a little bit from that hunter jumper barn, and a lot of just like trial and error at this point. You know what I mean? You have to learn through experience. You can sit there and read all day, but you actually have to do it to gain the hands-on experience. So I sure got hands-on experience. But Fury was always really cool. He was definitely a little bit more, he wasn't hot, but he wasn't like spooky either, but he just was a little different compared to Jiminy. I ended up teaching him how to jump, and it turned out like after a few years, he was really good. So I spent my time working with him and trail riding and same with Jiminy and fox hunting. And then I decided I wanted to take on another horse. Yes, I was in college. How did I do this? I was actually in ROTC, Army ROTC, so I had a scholarship that paid for my tuition. I worked at Rural King, and then I would do stalls at the barn too. So I also had like little odd jobs, like I would clean apartments or houses to help me out financially. And board was way cheaper down there and way cheaper back then. I also would find people to lease or half lease my horses, Jiminy, and then eventually Night Fury. So that's how I was able to afford it, if you're wondering. And then I bought this really beautiful off-the-track thoroughbred, Kaisley. She was actually located back where my parents were in Northern Illinois, and I was visiting, and my friend let us borrow the trailer, so we took it from Southern Illinois up to Northern Illinois. I tried her out, I really liked her, I purchased her, and I brought her back down to Carbondale, where I was in college. She had been restarted since being off the track. She was about 7 years old, and she hadn't been exposed to many trails, but I started trail riding her, did some work with her, and then we had the opportunity to move the horses to a private barn. Basically, we were able to move the horses from a boarding facility to a 20-acre facility that had a barn and stalls, and we were leasing the facility. Instead of boarding, we actually got to lease this facility, and it just had a beautiful pond, a big layout, and we had direct access to the trails. You just had to go down the road a little bit, and all of the trails were right there. So me and my friend in college at the time wanted to go in on this together, and we did. So I'm getting close to this was my senior year of college. So I decided I just wanted to bring Jiminy and Fury, and that I was then going to sell Kaisley after having her for a year. I found her a really good home. It was really great. So then we were at this new facility, and my friend was into kind of what I do as well. So she had, I think, a thoroughbred, she had a pony, she had her Morgan named Bear, and we just had a ball of a time. It was awesome. Well, then I graduated college. So at this point, I just had Jiminy and Night Fury. And I actually had ridden another horse while we were at the boarding facility, and her name was Tinkerbell. But she comes up a little bit later in my life story. But I was riding her when I had Jiminy, Kaisley, and Night Fury, and then there was Tinkerbell. I graduated college, and I actually moved to Texas for 2 months. I was a correctional officer down there because I got my degree in criminal justice. And at the time, I thought I was gonna, I don't know, be in the FBI or something like that, because I was really interested in all of that. But obviously later I realized that that wasn't my true calling. I had my friend take care of the horses while I was figuring everything out down there. And I was just about ready to ship Jiminy and Night Fury down to Texas from Illinois when I got another job offer, and I had the choice of Massachusetts, California, or Colorado. So at this point, I'm 22 years old. And I go, I'm gonna go to California. That sounds super fun. So I did. So I moved to California, and this was a government job. I had moved down there. I was looking at the barns and places where I could, keep the horses. And my first place in California was Chico. So I moved to Chico, and I was scoping everything out. However, I didn't like any of the barns in Chico, but there was one in Sacramento that just really hit home with me. It was a hunter jumper facility, but they had access to rice fields that you could ride all around, right across the street. And everybody was so welcoming. I loved the energy there. So I shipped Jiminy Cricket and Night Fury to California. Pretty crazy, right? So we were at this hunter jumper barn, and I really was able to focus on my jumping with Jiminy even more. And this is when Night Fury really started to transform in his jumping capabilities. And he was just awesome. It was just so cool. A lot of fun things happened in California. We were able to take them out on some trail rides in some different areas and haul out. And I, by the way, never had a trailer throughout this entire process thus far. I either had friends or I would pay for shipping, whatever the case may be. I had a Mustang, like I didn't even have a truck. I literally had a Mustang, a PT Cruiser before that, and then a Mustang. So it just made sense at the time. I then decided, okay, Night Fury and Jiminy are gonna be half leased by the trainer at this barn because she really liked them and they were excellent at jumping. And it made sense because I actually was like an hour and a half drive from Sacramento, but I would still go there 4 to 5 days a week. But it just made sense on another day or two that the trainer would use them. And it also made it way more affordable. So at this point, I'm like, I can get another horse. Totally crazy. But now at least I had a little bit more money compared to what I did before because I was working a big girl job. So I went and looked at some horses for sale, and I ended up purchasing another beautiful bay off the track thoroughbred, and I named him Cusco. Well, the funny thing about him is we were trying to get more information based off of his lip tattoo that he had at the time. And I had my friend, the one that I was really good friends with in Southern Illinois, looking it up in the Jockey Club registration, and we could not find it. Well, finally, we figured out that he was imported from the UK and had raced over there. So that was super fascinating. I did a lot of work with him in the round pen and in the ring. I took him on a few trail rides. He was only 5 years old at the time. And I got him to where he could walk, trot, canter, and we went over small jumps, like anything up to 2 foot. And I worked with him for several months, and then I ended up finding him an awesome home. This lady just kind of came into our life, and she wanted a horse that she could gallop on at the beach. She had a lot of money, and she had a private beach and access where she could just straight up run. And this horse, I was like, this is a dream home for him. So I decided to sell him to her, and it worked out really, really well. Well, at that point I was like, okay, I'm ready for another horse to continue to help and progress. And this is where Tinkerbell comes back up. So she was at the one boarding barn. She's a halflinger where I had them previously. And the owner had some health problems. So she was messaging me back and forth saying, hey, I'm gonna sell her. Are you interested? And I said, yes, I am. So long story short, I did purchase her, and I shipped her from Southern Illinois to California. And it was just amazing. So her story was I rode her a little bit at the farm, and she didn't do anything bad, but she had sat for several years, 6, 7 years. I basically restarted her, got her fit. I did a little bit of eventing, just schooling with her and jumping, and she was just so much fun. I nicknamed her Tinkerbell because she was very strong and just a blast to ride. So then what ended up happening is I was in California, in Chico, and then I got transferred to Sacramento, so that worked really well. So I was in California for about 2 years at that point, just under, and then I got a promotion. So the promotion was in Walla Walla, Washington. Obviously it was expected because I applied for the promotion, but I didn't think it was gonna happen so fast, and it did. So at that point, I had to make some decisions. I didn't know a soul when I moved to California, first off, and I didn't know a soul when I moved to Washington. So at this point, just exploring the world on my own accord. So I decided to donate Fury to the riding program. And he actually was blind in one eye and had to have his eye removed, which I did that while I was in California. And he just did so well at this barn and with this trainer, and he is still there today. Now I am going to be turning 32 actually in less than a week. It's really sad. But yeah, so this was a while ago. So he's literally still there, teaching kids how to jump. It makes me so happy. So I donated him to that program. The trainer was interested in Tinkerbell, so I actually purchased her. So it worked out really good, and I felt like I did my due diligence and spent a lot of time, and that they were better off than when I first got them. I put a lot of effort into them. Of course, Jiminy obviously was not going to be sold, so he was then going to go to Washington. So I moved to Washington, scoped out barns, and it was funny. They had this little local show going on at the fairgrounds. So of course I'm it's right by my house, so I went over there and I met some really amazing people. And then all of a sudden, this one woman, I started talking to her. And she was telling me she has a boarding facility. I explained my situation. I was like, do you have space? She goes, yeah. And I was like, I'm bringing my horse to your place. She's like, well, you can think about it. I was like, no, I'm bringing him there. I need him. Like, I'm freaking out without him. And she was like, okay. And such an amazing person, facility. Like, my heart is just so full looking back on how much people really did care. And at the time, you know, you don't think about it as much in the moment. So Jiminy was then hauled from California up to Walla Walla, Washington. And basically here, I just trail rode him. That's really all I did. I met a really good friend who was originally from France, and she leased a pony named Fancy at the time. So we would trail ride and just have a blast. And then there was another beautiful black and white draft cross that I would ride on occasion there as well. He used to be a mounted patrol horse, and unfortunately his owner had been injured and couldn't ride him. So I rode him a few times and just enjoyed my time with Jiminy. So I was working in Washington, and this is actually where I met Kyle, and that is a long story for another time. This is already such a long story. But anyways, I met Kyle in Washington. He was actually going to grad school in South Carolina, but he had family. His mom and dad were still living in Washington State. So this is where we met and started dating, but we were still like friends. So we would just hang out and enjoy each other's company. He was there for Christmas break, and we spent a couple weeks just doing some fun things. That will tie in later. So at this point, I didn't buy any other horses. I just enjoyed my time with Jiminy, and I was in Walla Walla for a year. Then I decided to transfer back to Illinois and work there just because I just felt like I needed to go back home for a little while. It wasn't like homesick per se, but it was just time to go back. So I, of course, shipped Jiminy to Illinois, and he stayed at a different farm from where he was when I first purchased him. So this place was even closer. It was literally 2 minutes. I could walk there. And same thing. I just rode him on the trails around here, just enjoyed him, and that was pretty much it. Because 3 months after I moved to Illinois, I got another promotion. Again, was not expecting this to happen, and I literally almost turned it down because I had just moved to Illinois. But I'm also a person that's like, if an opportunity presents itself, and obviously I applied for it for a reason, I shouldn't pass that up, because you don't know if the opportunity is going to come again. And thank goodness I did, because there's, you know, so much more to the story, and everything truly does happen for a reason. That's my belief. I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I looked for a place for Jiminy, and I found a gorgeous hunter jumper barn, and this also had beautiful trails and fields to ride through. So I shipped him to Chattanooga. And at that point, I was just going out and riding him every day, working a lot on jumping and focusing on that. And then Kyle was now not that far away from me because he was in South Carolina, so about 2.5, 3 hours. We would then like meet up and hang out. We had stayed friends this whole time. And then I went and visited him, and that's when things were really serious. They became serious at that point. Well, going back to the equestrian portion, there was this little Arabian at the barn. He was like 3 years old at the time, coming 4, and his owners wanted me to help work with him a little bit. Was not broke to ride or started under saddle yet, so I just did some groundwork and in-hand work, and he was sort of like a project, and they were paying me to work with him. And all of a sudden, the manager of this facility contacted me one day, and she said, "Hey Shay, this horse, this Arabian, they're not paying board. They basically have like abandoned him. Do you want him?" And I was like, oh my gosh. Then I purchased Abu, who was a registered Arabian, and he was not yet broke to ride. So I had spent time training him, and then I ended up doing his first few rides here in Tennessee. Well, long story short, shortly after purchasing Abu, Kyle surprised me and proposed with Jiminy and Abu. And I thought it was just the most magical experience. And now life was really about to change because he had just got a job as an engineer in Michigan. So I had to do a little bit of long distance and plan the wedding in Michigan while I was still in Tennessee. And then I actually got a transfer to Michigan. So that was amazing. So then we shipped Jiminy and Abu to Michigan, and I boarded them there for a little while, and it was just awesome. I was just so excited to be getting married, and then our wedding was just a fairy tale. Jiminy has been a huge part of every aspect of my adult life, as you've seen and heard so far. And of course, he was in my wedding. I had my dream wedding. It's unbelievable. So that was awesome. But now we were just renting a house, and I was boarding the horses. And like I said, I would go there and ride every day and trail ride. And I did a little bit of jumping here and there, but pretty much that was it. And then at that point, we were then looking for our farm. So this is when stuff really gets wild. So we spent a year saving up for a down payment for our farm. We looked at about 30 farms until we found what's now known as Free Spirit Equestrian. And when I saw that listing, I knew immediately that this was the place. Like, after looking at all the other places, I knew it. So at this point, it was about 5 years ago that we purchased Free Spirit Farm. And of course, that's not what it was named before. It had pretty much just been sitting for a little while, not had horses, and needed a lot of work. So of course, I was sitting there thinking, what name works? What name works? And I was sort of a free spirit. Like, as you can see, I just sort of bounced around and I followed my heart, and I was an opportunist and I took advantage of what was presented to me. So Free Spirit Farm, Free Spirit Equestrian, it evolved, it blossomed, it happened. And that was the highest point of my entire life, because my dream of owning a horse farm came true, and I was 26 years old. Like, it was incredible. So we got to the house, and for about a month, we got everything prepared. We fixed fences to get everything ready for the horses to come. Then once everything was ready, we got Jiminy and Abu there, and it was amazing. Like, I had my horses at home with me. It was like a surreal experience, and I just kept saying, like, is this real life? Like, I can walk out of my house and my horses are here on my own property. So that was cool. So I was still working for the government at this point, but my whole intent with purchasing a farm was to make some type of equestrian living business from that, right? Because at this point, I'm like, I am so burnt out from the government. I don't have my creative outlet. I want to do what's going to make me happy. But obviously, you have to do things little by little. So Jiminy and Abu were there, and then shortly after that, I went out to look for more horses, because I'm like, okay, now I really can focus more on my projects and looking for horses and working with them. And I found this beautiful little POA pony. She was like so fat, and she was just out with the cattle. And like, when I went to look at her, and she, I don't know, she had sat for a number of years, but she had been broke, and I bought her. So I named her Pocahontas, and she was amazing, and I worked with her for a few years on multidiscipline, Western English, jumping, trails, and then she ended up being purchased by a lovely local girl who still shows her. I have ran into them at shows several times, so that made me really happy. I got a Gypsy Banner POA cross, and his name was Aslan of Narnia. He was such a cool horse, and I got him as a 4-year-old, and he wasn't started under saddle, so I did all of his training, and he just rocked. He could jump to the moon, great on the trails. I just spent so much time with Aslan. It was so funny because we were bonded, and he would come to me when I would call him in the from the pasture. But the thing about him was, like, I had just started the lesson program with Jiminy, Abu, and Polka, just little by little, like a few lessons every week, and that would build and build and build. And Aslan was like super good. He never did anything bad, but he would not let anyone else like ride him. Like, he would just stand in the middle and just be like, I'm not moving unless if I was around. Like, if I would walk away and leave, he'd be okay, but he was very attached to me. And at this point, I knew what my mission was. I knew that it was going to be working with horses and eventually finding them a home. I knew to my core that that was important to me. And it didn't matter what anybody else thought or what they said. I just knew that this was important to me and that I was going to pursue it no matter what. And I did. So eventually a time came. I felt like I had done a lot with him and that it was the right choice to find him a home. The first person just so happened to come and look at him, absolutely loved him, and it all worked out. And I still get updates today that he is just amazing and just the best horse that she could have ever asked for. So that makes me so happy. So I sold Aslan. And then my friend from Carbondale, I ended up seeing that she was selling one of her babysitter type horses, Mary Poppins. So I purchased her from my friend from Illinois and had her shipped to Michigan. Long story short, she ended up having an injury, so unfortunately it would not work out the way we thought, but I did work with her and I did everything I could for her. And then I found her a suitable home about a year later. So at this point, most of these horses were private sale, and then I started getting more into the auctions. Like, I had been to auctions before, but I had never purchased myself just because it just so happened that all the right horses came to me private sale. So I went to this auction, looking around, and then all of a sudden this gorgeous Overo paint, registered everything, came into the ring. And I had seen him previously and had looked him over. Everything looked good, and we saw him move. Nobody was riding him or anything. I knew I had to bid on him. So I purchased him. Let me tell you, he was one of the most amazing horses I've ever owned in my life. So Pascal was not broke to ride at the time, and I worked with him, and he turned out to be literally just the best, like, kids horse. He did Western, English, bridleless, jumping, trails, hunter paces, shows, anything you can think of. Eventually I found him his home a few years later. I think I had him for about just under 2 years. And he was just incredible. Like I don't think I'll ever have a horse that's more kind and beautiful as him. He was about 16 hands high and just an absolute sweetheart. And he was in my lesson program, just an angel. Then I decided to go to a place where there were multiple horses for sale. At this barn, I purchased this super stocky, short, cute little pony, and I named her Aurora. So once I got her home and got her settled in, I just did a little bit of groundwork with her, but I could tell that she was definitely a babysitter type. So after working with her for a little bit of time, I started riding her, figured out right away that she was broke to ride, a super good girl, and she just needed to get into shape. So I worked with her for a little bit, and then she was able to go into the lesson program. And again, another phenomenal pony, did 100 paces, a little bit of jumping, walk, trot, canter, Western, English, lots of trail rides, camping, just so much fun. And one of my favorite memories with her was going up to the UP and camping with Kyle. It was just such a fun trip. Really enjoyed her. She was a really hard one to let go. And eventually, again, I did find her a home. And then actually just a couple weeks after I had purchased Aurora, the same person I purchased Aurora from had reached out to me saying, hey, I have another pony if you're interested. She sent me a picture. I was like, oh my gosh, no, because she was drop dead gorgeous, right? A silver dapple, absolutely beautiful. And she was like, well, she doesn't seem to know much, but she's not nasty or anything. So I went and looked at her and I was like, of course I have to purchase her because she's like a Barbie pony, beautiful, so sweet, great conformation. And again, she wasn't really broke to ride, but after some groundwork and just some training, I started riding her when she was ready, and she was great. Now, she was very, very fast, so not every single person could ride her, but she was overall just so much fun. And she did some jumping, some trail riding, Western English. I took her to some clinics and just had so much fun with her. And eventually I found her a home too. So while I'm doing all this, I am still going to clinics. I'm learning from clinicians. I'm doing a lot of online courses. So I'm always trying to stay sharp on my skills and my equestrian journey. And then of course, actually getting out there and doing it. I also went to saddle fitting school throughout this process, which was a 6-month program, and I had to travel back and forth to South Carolina, and I got that certification as well. So at this point, my lesson program was growing and growing. It was amazing. And then come about 2020, when COVID hit, I was still working for the government at this point, and then I just decided, I'm done with this. I know I can do this full time, and I'm gonna do it. So I quit my job, I put in my 2-week notice, and I just went full out with the lesson program, and it completely blew up. After purchasing Aurora and Iridessa shortly after one another, a few months later, I went back to that same barn, looked at a few horses, when I noticed this one horse. I was looking in a field, he just walked up to me, and I had like a fake flower in my hair, and he came up and started playing with it, and he was so friendly. And I decided to purchase him, and then another big, beautiful horse that they had there. He was just gorgeous and tall, dark, and handsome, and I actually rode both of them while I was there, and they were just fantastic. And I knew that one was gated, and that wasn't really my thing, but I was like, I want to just try it. I think it'd be a great addition to my program, something different. And of course, this is Arlo and Gaston. So I actually purchased them the same day from the same person, and I still have them today. So that was over 3 years ago now, and they have just been such blessings. So I had a blast with them. And then this was fast forward a few months after that, I had then rehomed a couple horses that I had talked about previously. I went and looked at this barn again for some other horses for sale. Well, I noticed this one horse, and he definitely was more of like a rescue type. She had just got him in. I think he was isolated in a barn, and he was this beautiful Palomino paint. And then there was this other black and white horse there. And so these were definitely more rescue cases. And I decided that, hey, you know, I would like to take on something like this right now. It makes sense. It was winter time, so I knew I'd have a lot of time to get them healthy and just take everything slow and work with them. So I purchased Flynn Rider and Miko. And I brought them home to Free Spirit Equestrian, and same thing, I just rehabilitated them, got them healthy. Miko was not broke to ride. I think he had driven before, but he had not been ridden, so I had to train him. And then Flynn had been ridden, but he definitely needed a refresher. So I worked with them for several months, and Miko became a part of the program, and Flynn did a little bit of work in the program too. However, one of my students at the time was ready to purchase, so she purchased both Flynn and Iridessa, and there's actually a video on that below. You can check it out. So that was just really magical, and she still owns them, you know, as of today. And it's just funny how sometimes things just go full circle. So again, at this point, my lesson program is totally taking off. And when I sold Iridessa and Flynn together, that's when I started really forming my YouTube channel. So I started my YouTube channel end of June, early July of 2021. So it's only been 2 years. I didn't have TikTok. I didn't have any other social media other than like Facebook. I didn't really use Instagram or anything. But Kyle had like brought up like, you should do YouTube, you should do YouTube. But I'm kind of stubborn, so I didn't really take it seriously until I decided, yeah, I should do YouTube. Once I made that decision, I was all in, fully committed, and it was awesome. And if you go to some of my earlier videos, which are really scary, by the way, I like watch them and cringe because the editing is like so bad. But anyways, you got to start somewhere. I went and visited my parents in Illinois one day, and I went and looked at a beautiful Appaloosa for sale, and I tried him. I knew that he would need a little bit of a refresher, but he had a lot of Western training on him. I purchased him and decided to name him Pongo. So I brought him back to the farm, gave him a little bit of a tune-up, and then he could go right into the program and was awesome. Trained him to do some English as well, which he hadn't done previously, and some jumping. He did equestrian team. He was just awesome. He was such a good boy, and I decided to, you know, find him a home. It had been a year later, and I found him a fantastic home where he just has a little cowboy that rides him around, and he's a family horse, so very, very happy with that. We went to this one home, and when we pulled up, the horse was completely skin and bones, way worse than that was indicated on the pictures, and this horse was not broke. You could just tell. Beautiful, huge Appaloosa gelding, and I offered her money on the spot, loaded him in the trailer, and we took him home to Free Spirit Equestrian. So I got him healthy, I rehabbed him. You could see every vertebrae, every rib. He was just skin and bones, and it's just crazy because obviously you don't want to just stuff them with feed right away. We did it the appropriate way, but he gained weight so fast. It shows me how little he was actually receiving. Of course, we had the vet working with us and everybody else as well. Well, long story short, after the vet check, we initially found out that he had bone chips in his knees, so he could do some light riding. So I did a little bit of work with him to what he was capable of physically, and I had him for a while. And then I found him a home where he was basically like a therapy horse and doing very light work. Could do like walk, trot, and he could go on some trail rides, and you know, he enjoyed having people around him. He was really good natured. The condition he was in was really sad and poor, but it was so rewarding to be able to rehabilitate him and get him as healthy as he can for what he was physically capable of, and then land him in a home that made sense for him. And again, that's my ultimate goal, is just finding a home that's suitable for that horse, whatever the case may be. But at this point in time, my mission is more geared towards finding horses with potential. And by that, I don't just mean finding the prettiest or nicest horses. I'm finding horses that I know will be suitable riding horses with some time, effort, training, and care. I will sometimes take on a straight up rescue horse like Geppetto, but I know how much time, money, and energy that takes. And it takes a lot of funds because I'm not a nonprofit, nor do I want to be, for my own reasons. This is what makes sense for me. So at this point, my lesson program was in full swing. YouTube was still a learning curve, but starting to develop more. And I decided to go to an auction because I wanted to find my next horse. And I went to this big sale in Ohio, and that is where I purchased Jafar, who is my Frisian standard bred. So Jafar had just had a few rides on him at the time. He was 5 years old and registered as a Frisian heritage horse. And I brought him home, you know, did all my process of quarantine and groundwork, and then I started riding him. Jafar has come so far since being purchased. I'm so proud of him. He's done a ton of camping, trail riding, shows. He's actually doing phenomenal in my program right now, and I am so thankful that we crossed paths. Well, after that, a few months later, I think it was actually just 2 months later, I went to another sale in Illinois, and absolutely crazy. I purchased 3 ponies at this sale. So this is where I purchased Cruella, Duke of Wesselton, and then Olaf. So I worked with them for a long period of time. Cruella was super fast. She had been a barrel horse previously and had picked up a lot of bad habits and was kind of hot. So I worked with her, got her a little more balanced, took her on trail rides. She was a boss on the trail. And then Wessel was a little more skittish, but I spent a lot of time, bonding with him, getting him comfortable. He did English, Western, some jumping. And then Olaf, he was just awesome. Loved to jump, neck rein, side pass, just did a ton with him. He was great in the program, jumping, shows, hunter paces, whatever you want to do, Olaf is game. So I have since then rehomed Cruella and Duke of Wesselton, and soon here Olaf will eventually be going to a home when I feel as though I can find the right fit for him. So really busy at this point in my journey, just working with horses, finding them homes, and I typically do not sell more than 1 to 2 horses a year, but there was one year, I think it was 2021 or 22, where I ended up selling 5 or 6 just because it was the way just everything worked out. But I always keep horses for usually at least a year, but sometimes up to 5. I decided to go to another auction. I wasn't really planning on buying at this auction, but all of a sudden this beautiful black mare caught my eye, and this is who we know as Bagheera today. So I purchased her, and she's an older mare and one that I decided to keep for life because she's 28 and I don't think it's right to sell her. So she had been a buggy horse her whole life. So I had made the transition to riding with her slowly but surely, and she has just been such an amazing girl. All the students love her. She is fast, she is fun. She'll do just about everything you ask her to do. And again, she will be staying with me forever. Fast forward to spring, May of 2022, I went to a large Appaloosa sale. So at this point, I'm getting really into the auctions, and I will still buy private sale, but now I'm a lot more interested in purchasing from auctions. I love that there's like a surplus of horses available. So this is the path that I've been going down at this point. This is where I bought Prince Charming, which unfortunately we know that he succumbed to all of his injuries and issues, and he did have to be put down. So that was a part in my horsemanship journey, getting him and rehabbing him and doing everything I can. That was the first horse that I've ever had to put down. So this really was a tough one for me. I'd never had to put a horse down or anything like that. I just had to realize you can't always help every horse, and you have to do what makes sense with all of the information you have available to you and the experience that you have. So unfortunately, his story did not end, like I would have wanted it to, but it was what was best for him. So he taught me so much throughout that process and really actually helped me grow and helped educate people. So that was one of the only positives that came from that situation in regards to what the end result was.
Then for my birthday in July, I was able to purchase my dream horse sight unseen, and this is where I bought Mushu. It was a dream come true, and I started him under saddle myself, so he had just been started under saddle recently, and just seeing him step out of that trailer for the first time was awesome. So I had never bought a horse sight unseen previously, so this was a big deal to me, but I am so glad that I did because he turned out to just be phenomenal, and I'm so excited to continue my journey and training with him over the next several years.
And then come November, we went to a sale, and this is where we bought Buzz Lightyear. So I worked with him, and then recently we had found him a home. He was a super fun pony, the first small pony that I've ever purchased, and it was such a great experience, and he taught me a lot. And then one of the biggest things that ever happened to me was I went to an auction end of February after going from auction to auction, really wanting to purchase a horse to start working with. I came across Belle at the last minute, who's my beautiful draft cross mare, and you guys know that whole story. And if you don't know that story, check a playlist out in the description. Trust me, you'll definitely want to watch because it still amazes me to this point. I purchased her, and then of course, started working with her, determined she wasn't really broke to ride or didn't have much training on her, and then just did my due diligence, did a vet check and a blood pregnancy test. Got the results back, and lo and behold, she was pregnant, and now we have Miss Ezzy, who's just an absolute doll. So that was an incredible experience, and I learned so much when it comes to mares being pregnant and foaling because I had never done that before. So I learned a ton, and that was a huge part that is a huge part of my equestrian story. Then of course, like after I had purchased Belle and I had to put Prince Charming down, I knew that I just needed a horse that, you know, would fill my soul and that would just work for my program and just something really special. And that's when Zazu came into my life, and very happy that he came along when he did. He's kind of like a saving grace. He was just ready to go, no shenanigans, just a dream. Awesome on the trails. He jumps, he's just fun. So I'm so happy that he's here. That is my equestrian story. It's pretty wild, and I'm sure a lot of you did not know all of the back history behind me moving all over the place and all the things that happened prior to getting Free Spirit Equestrian. And like I said, I did not come from money. Nothing was handed to me. Anybody could do this. It's just you really have to put in the time and energy and work for it and make good judgment calls, right? Everything worked out in a way that I could have never imagined, but now I know that it is possible and that it can be possible for other people too. Being at a few of the boarding barns, I was able to work with some of those trainers and take lessons, and it was cool because I got a little bit of information from so many different disciplines, from so many different parts of the country, and it's just been awesome. And I've also been able to travel internationally and ride like in Costa Rica and Mexico and Wyoming and experience all different types of horsemanship and riding. So that has taught me a lot as well. And yeah, that's basically my story at this point. I'm gonna be 32 on July 24th. So it's pretty crazy how far I've come considering where I started. And I hope that you learned a little bit more about me, and I hope that maybe some of this will inspire you to do the same if you have been on the fence about wanting to start a equestrian business, or if you have just wondered about where I came from. Now you know. All right, horse lovers, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything Free Spirit Equestrian or any other parts of this journey, and I'll see you next time.